My name is Amalia, and at 68 years old, I thought my life would be simple and peaceful in the home my parents left me. When my son Harry married Catherine, I was overjoyed. I finally had the daughter I always wanted. But as months passed, Catherine changed. She became obsessed with my property and eventually dragged me to court to declare me incompetent. What she never expected was the judge freezing in shock when I walked in. Before I tell you how my own daughter-in-law tried to steal everything from me, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about family betrayal and unexpected justice. I spent 35 years teaching 4th grade at Pinewood Elementary. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved every minute of it. My classroom was my kingdom, and my students were my subjects. We learned together, laughed together, and sometimes cried together. I never made much money, but I had something more valuable than wealth, a purpose. My husband John passed away when our son Harry was only 12. It was just the two of us after that, living in the modest 3-bedroom house my parents had left me. The house wasn't fancy grand oak tree in the front yard, a small vegetable garden in the back, and enough memories in between to fill 1,000 photo albums. Harry was my pride and joy. He worked hard in school, earned a scholarship to law school, and became a public defender. While his classmates chased high-paying corporate jobs, Harry chose to help those who couldn't afford legal representation. "Everyone deserves justice, Mom," he would tell me, "not just those who can pay for it." His idealism reminded me so much of his father. I still remember the day Harry called me, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I met someone. Her name is Catherine, and she's amazing." Catherine worked as a paralegal at Bryson and Fields, a prestigious law firm downtown. They had met during a case where they were on opposite sides. Harry defending a young man accused of shoplifting, and Catherine working for the prosecution. "She's smart, driven, and beautiful," Harry gushed. "We disagree on almost everything professionally, but personally we just click." Their courtship was like something from a movie. Harry would come over for Sunday dinners and share stories about their dates, hiking in the mountains, attending jazz concerts, or simply talking for hours at a little cafe downtown. I was happy for him. After losing his father so young, Harry deserved all the love in the world. When I finally met Catherine, I understood the attraction immediately. She was tall and elegant with piercing blue eyes and a confident smile. She complimented my pot roast, asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career, and seemed genuinely interested in our family photos. "Harry talks about you constantly," she told me, squeezing my hand. "I feel like I already know you." The wedding was small but beautiful, held in the garden of a historic inn. Catherine wore a sleek, modern dress that made her look like a movie star. Harry couldn't take his eyes off her, and I cried happy tears watching them exchange vows. This was what I had always wanted for my son, someone to share his life with, to build a future together. "You've raised an incredible man, Amalia," Catherine's father told me during the reception. "Our Katie has always been ambitious." Harry grounds her, gives her perspective on what really matters in life. I noticed Catherine's ambition early on. She talked about becoming a lawyer herself someday, about buying a house in Lakeside Heights, about traveling to Europe. I admired her drive. My generation of women often didn't aim high enough, and I was glad Harry had found someone who knew her own mind. After the honeymoon, Catherine suggested they move in with me temporarily to save money. "We want to put a down payment on a house," she explained. "If we live with you for a year, we can save almost everything we earn." Harry looked uncertain. "Mom, we don't want to impose. The house isn't that big." "Nonsense," I said, genuinely excited about the arrangement. "This house has always felt too empty with just me. I'd love the company." For the first few months, everything was perfect. Catherine cooked dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Harry handled yard work on weekends, and I finally had the family I'd dreamed of since John died. We watched movies together, played board games, and stayed up late talking about everything from politics to philosophy. But I started noticing small things. Catherine would pick up my mother's antique silver picture frames and comment, "These must be valuable. Have you ever had them appraised?" Or she'd walk through the living room and say, "This house has such potential. If you knock down this wall, the space would flow so much better." I didn't mind at first. Young people always want to change things to put their stamp on the world. But the comments became more frequent, more pointed. Harry was working longer hours at the public defender's office, taking on more cases to build his reputation, Catherine explained. This left her and me alone together more often. She began inviting friends over a sleek, polished group who worked at her law firm. They would sit in my living room drinking wine and discussing properties, investments, and career advancement. Catherine tells us you've lived in this house for decades, one of them said to me one evening. Property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed. You must be sitting on a gold mine. I smiled politely but felt uncomfortable. The house wasn't a property or an investment to me. It was my home. Later that night, I overheard Catherine on the phone in the kitchen. Yes, we're still at her place, she was saying in a low voice. I know, but it's just for another few months. The housing market is about to boom in this area, and we need to be positioned properly. Trust me, it'll be worth it. I tried to dismiss my unease. Catherine was just ambitious, forward-thinking. There was nothing wrong with that. But as I was falling asleep, I couldn't help wondering why she had asked me so many questions that evening about my will, my bank accounts, and whether I had considered estate planning. The transformation in Catherine was subtle at first, like watching a flower close its petals as evening approaches. The warm, interested young woman who had charmed me at our first meeting gradually became cooler, more calculating. 6 months into their stay, she stopped joining me for morning coffee. Our conversations grew shorter, more utilitarian. Will you be home for dinner, she would ask, not looking up from her phone. Yes, unless you and Harry have plans, I would reply. Harry's working late again. I'll probably just make a salad for myself. No invitation for me to join her. No suggestion that we might eat together. Catherine's interest in my financial situation intensified. She began leaving brochures for retirement communities on the kitchen counter. Just something to think about, she said when I questioned her. Many people your age find managing a house too burdensome. I'm managing fine, I told her. This house isn't a burden, it's my home. She smiled thinly. Of course, Amalia. I'm just thinking about the future. This place is so outdated. The kitchen needs remodeling, the bathroom. Fixtures are ancient, and don't get me started on the carpeting. Harry was rarely home to hear these conversations. When he was Catherine, transformed into the loving, supportive wife. She would touch my shoulder affectionately, ask about my day, and make references to when we get our own place that kept Harry believing their stay was still temporary. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find Catherine's friends in my living room drinking coffee and discussing the neighborhood. This street is changing so fast, a woman named Tara was saying. The Johnsons sold their place for $700,000. Can you believe it? And their house is smaller than this one. Location, another friend chimed in. 10 years ago, you couldn't give away property here. Now it's the hottest market in the county. They fell silent when they saw me offering tight smiles and quick greetings. I made myself coffee and retreated to the sunroom, but I could hear them whispering. How much longer, one asked. Not much, Catherine replied. These things take time if you want them done right. Later that day, I overheard Catherine on the phone in the backyard. The old woman is getting suspicious, she said. I need to accelerate the timeline. Old woman. Was that how she thought of me? I was 67, certainly not young anymore, but old woman sounded so dismissive, so dehumanizing. I wanted to confront her, but something held me back. What would I say to Harry? He was so in love with Catherine, so certain she could do no wrong. Would he believe me if I told him his wife was being disrespectful behind his back? Instead, I watched and waited, hoping I was misinterpreting things. Catherine began redecorating without consulting me. My family photos disappeared from the mantel, replaced by modern art pieces. The comfortable old armchair where I read every evening was moved to the basement and replaced by a sleek leather monstrosity that hurt my back. My mother's china cabinet was too cluttered looking and was relegated to the dining room corner. We need to brighten this place up, Catherine explained when I protested. Make it more appealing. Appealing to whom, I asked. I live here, and I liked it the way it was. She sighed as if I were being difficult. Amalia, at some point you'll need to think about selling. Properties like this are more marketable when they have a contemporary feel. I'm not selling my home, I said firmly. Catherine gave me a look that chilled me to the bone. A calculating, patient look that seemed to say, "We'll see about that." In the early spring, I caught a terrible flu. My temperature soared to 103 and I could barely get out of bed. Harry was in the middle of a difficult case and rarely home. It was Catherine who was supposed to be checking on me, bringing me medication and soup. Except, she didn't. She would leave a glass of water and pills on my nightstand in the morning before leaving for work, and then I wouldn't see her until the next day. No offers to call a doctor, no checking my temperature, no concern about my worsening cough. On the third day, when I hadn't eaten anything substantial in 72 hours, I called my old friend Martha from the classroom phone beside my bed. "You sound terrible," Martha said. "I'm coming over right now." Martha was horrified at my condition. She called my doctor immediately, and then made homemade chicken soup while we waited for the appointment. "Where's your daughter-in-law?" she asked. "Shouldn't she be taking care of you?" I made excuses for Catherine work commitments, a big case at the firm, but Martha's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Something's not right here, Amalia," she said quietly. "A family member doesn't leave someone your age alone with a fever that high." The doctor confirmed I had developed pneumonia and prescribed antibiotics and rest. Martha stayed with me for 2 days, sleeping in the guest room and checking on me throughout the night. When Catherine finally realized Martha was there, her reaction was strange. Rather than being grateful for the help, she seemed annoyed, territorial. "We could have handled this," she told Martha coldly. "There was no need to insert yourself." "Amalia needed help," Martha replied firmly. "She could have ended up in the hospital." After I recovered, I noticed something disturbing. Some of the financial documents I kept in my home office had been moved. My will, which had been in the bottom drawer of my desk, was now in a folder with other papers. The deed to my house, normally in my filing cabinet, was on the desk itself. Someone had been going through my private papers. And I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who it was. After my illness, I became more vigilant. I started paying closer attention to my mail, my bank statements, and any documents related to my home and finances. Something wasn't right, and the fog of trust I'd been living in was finally beginning to lift. One morning, while Catherine and Harry were both at work, I sat down at my computer and logged into my bank account, something I hadn't done in months. What I saw made my heart race. There had been several large transfers from my savings account to an account I didn't recognize. 5,000 here, 3,000 there, all labeled as estate planning services. I had never authorized these transfers. I had never hired any estate planning service. My hands trembling, I called the bank. After verifying my identity, the customer service representative confirmed my fears. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington, those transfers were authorized using your online banking credentials. The requests came from your home IP address. Someone had accessed my accounts from my own home. Someone who knew my passwords, who had access to my computer." When Catherine came home that evening, I confronted her directly. "Have you been accessing my bank accounts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked startled for a moment, then composed herself. "What are you talking about, Amalia?" I showed her the bank statement. Almost $20,000 has been transferred out of my account for estate planning services I never authorized. Catherine's expression shifted to one of concern, so perfectly practiced it almost seemed genuine. "Oh, Amalia, we talked about this. Don't you remember? After your illness, you were worried about what would happen to the house if something happened to you. You asked me to help set up a trust." "I never asked you to do any such thing," I said firmly. "And I certainly never authorized you to transfer my money." Catherine sighed and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Harry. I'm worried about you. First the paranoia during your illness, and now these memory issues." When Harry came home, Catherine had already painted me as confused, possibly suffering from early dementia. "She doesn't remember our conversations," Catherine told him. "She's accusing me of stealing from her." Harry looked at me with concern that broke my heart. Mom Catherine has been helping you organize your estate planning. We discussed this several times. No, we didn't, I insisted. Harry, someone has been transferring money out of my accounts without my permission. The look Harry and Catherine exchanged said everything. They thought I was losing my mind. Maybe we should have Dr. Preston take a look at you, Harry suggested gently. Just to rule anything out. I felt cornered. My own son didn't believe me. And worse, he thought I was becoming senile. Over the next few weeks, I began my own private investigation. I took a taxi to the bank and requested all my records for the past year. I discovered that small withdrawals had been happening for months, gradually increasing in size. I also learned that my mailing address for bank statements had been changed online to a P.O. box I didn't recognize, which explained why I hadn't noticed the activity sooner. At the county records office, I discovered something even more disturbing. There was a recent filing that added Catherine's name to the deed of my house, a document that appeared to have my signature on it, but I had never signed such a document. With growing horror, I realized Catherine had been systematically taking control of my assets. The question was why. Through careful online research at the public library away from my home computer, I discovered Catherine had a secret her flawless image concealed. She had massive credit card debt over $100,000. Designer, clothes, expensive vacations, luxury cars, all financed with plastic. Her salary as a paralegal couldn't sustain her lifestyle, and from what I could piece together, she and Harry were nowhere near saving for a house. In fact, they were drowning financially. My property, my mortgage-free, increasingly valuable home, was her ticket out of debt. When I returned home that evening, I found Catherine and Harry sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. "Where have you been?" Mom Harry asked. "We were worried." "I went to the library," I said simply. Catherine gave me a tight smile. "Amalia, we need to talk about something important. Harry and I have been discussing your living situation." "My living situation," I repeated. "Yes," she continued smoothly. "After your illness and these recent memory issues, we're concerned about you living alone." "I don't live alone. You both live here." "That's temporary," Catherine said. "Harry and I will be moving out soon. We found a lovely condo." Harry looked uncomfortable but nodded. "We think it might be best if you considered Sunshine Meadows." Sunshine Meadows was an assisted living facility on the edge of town. Not a nursing home exactly, but close enough. "I'm not going to Sunshine Meadows," I said firmly. "This is my home. I'm staying here." Catherine's face hardened slightly. "Amalia, be reasonable. This house is too much for you to maintain. You're getting older. What if you fall? What if you get sick again?" "I've maintained this house for 40 years," I replied. "I'm perfectly capable of continuing to do so." The conversation grew heated. Catherine insisted I wasn't thinking clearly. Harry looked torn, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict his wife. Eventually, Catherine laid down her ultimatum to Harry when she thought I couldn't hear. "It's your mother or me," she hissed in the hallway. "I cannot keep living like this. She needs professional care and you know it. If you really love me, you'll make this happen." The next morning, Harry approached me alone. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice strained. "Mom, I love you," he began. "But I think Catherine is right. The doctor said after pneumonia, at your age, living alone isn't safe. Sunshine Meadows has nurses, activities, people your own age." "I don't need nurses," I said. "And I don't want to live with people my own age. I want to live in my own home." Harry took a deep breath. "The thing is, Mom, I'm worried about your mental state, too. You're forgetting conversations, making accusations. Catherine thinks it might be early signs of dementia." "I'm not forgetting anything, Harry. Catherine is lying to you." His face hardened. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Why would she lie? What would she have to gain?" I wanted to tell him everything I'd discovered about Catherine's debt, about the transferred money, about the deed. But the look on his face told me he wouldn't believe any of it. In his mind, I was already compromised, confused, paranoid. 2 weeks later, I was served with court papers. Catherine had filed for conservatorship over me and my estate, claiming I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. The documentation included statements from medical professionals I'd never met attesting to my cognitive decline. My own daughter-in-law was trying to legally take control of everything I owned, and my son was supporting her. The day after receiving the court papers, I called Harry. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times that day. No response. I even went to his office, only to be told by the receptionist that he was in court all day. My son was avoiding me. The realization felt like a physical blow. I reached out to friends I'd known for years, people who had been to my home for dinner who had watched Harry grow up. Many didn't return my calls. Those who did seemed uncomfortable distant. "I heard you've been having some difficulties," my neighbor Susan said vaguely when I ran into her at the grocery store. "Catherine mentioned you might be moving to that nice facility on Oak Street." Catherine had been busy spreading her narrative. In her version, I was a confused old woman who needed to be protected from herself. And people believed her the polished, articulate young professional over the aging former teacher. I felt isolated, betrayed, and increasingly desperate. The court date was only 3 weeks away, and I had no idea how to fight back. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Lawyers cost hundreds of dollars per hour, and Catherine had made sure I couldn't access most of my money. In my desperation, I reached out to Jasmine, a former student who had always kept in touch. She had been in my 4th grade class 20 years ago, and now worked as a legal aide at a small law firm downtown. Jasmine had sent me Christmas cards every year, occasionally stopped by with coffee, and had always seemed genuinely fond of me. When I called and explained my situation, Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Miss Harrington, I'll be right over. Don't worry, we'll figure this out." 2 hours later, Jasmine was sitting at my kitchen table, reviewing the court documents with a furrowed brow. "This is serious," she said finally. "They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and need a conservator to manage your affairs, and they're requesting that Catherine be appointed as your conservator." "I'm not incompetent," I said. "Catherine is trying to steal my property." Jasmine nodded. "I believe you, but we need evidence to counter their claims." She offered me her guest room while we prepared my case. "It might be safer for you to stay somewhere else until the hearing," she suggested. "If Catherine realizes you're fighting back, she might escalate things." That night, I packed a small suitcase and left my own home feeling like a fugitive. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was fleeing the house I owned to escape the woman I had welcomed into it. Jasmine's apartment was small but comfortable. She gave me her bedroom and took the couch, ignoring my protests. "You taught me fractions and believed in me when no one else did," she said simply. "Let me help you now." Over the next 2 weeks, Jasmine and I worked tirelessly. During the day, while she was at her job, I researched conservatorship laws at the public library. In the evenings, we strategized. Jasmine used her legal connections to gather information about Catherine. What we discovered was shocking. Catherine had done this before. Before meeting Harry, she had worked as a paralegal at a firm specializing in elder law. There, she had been involved in at least 3 cases where elderly clients had signed over assets to their advisors. In 2 cases, complaints had been filed but later dropped when the elderly individuals mysteriously changed their minds or were suddenly declared incompetent. "She targets older people with assets," Jasmine said grimly. "She builds trust, then manipulates them into giving her control of their property." "But why did the complaints get dropped?" I asked. "I don't know for sure," Jasmine admitted. "But I have a theory. Look at the names of the doctors who provided statements in those cases. Now look at your case." The same 2 doctors appeared in all the documents. Doctors I had never met but who had supposedly evaluated me and found me incompetent. "She has accomplices," I whispered, feeling sick. Jasmine nodded. "The good news is we can use this in court. The bad news is we're up against a sophisticated operation. These people know what they're doing." As the court date approached, I cycled through emotions: despair, rage, determination, fear. Some days I could barely get out of bed, crushed by the weight of Harry's betrayal. Other days I worked with manic energy, preparing my defense. "What if we lose?" I asked Jasmine one evening. "What if the judge believes their fake medical reports Jasmine squeezed my hand. We have to believe the truth will matter. And remember, you're not alone anymore. I'm with you all the way. Her words triggered a memory, something I had pushed to the back of my mind for years. I wasn't alone. And I had connections. I hadn't used connections from a life I had left behind. Jasmine, I said slowly, there's something about me you don't know. Something almost no one knows. What is it, Miss Harrington? I took a deep breath. Before I was a teacher, I was someone else. Someone who might be able to help us. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out an old leather-bound album from my suitcase. I had grabbed it almost as an afterthought when packing to leave my house. Now I opened it carefully, revealing photographs and newspaper clippings I hadn't looked at in years. Before I moved here, before I became a fourth-grade teacher, I had another life, I told Jasmine. A very different life. I showed her a yellowed newspaper front page. The headline read, Judge Amalia Harrington makes history first woman appointed to federal circuit. Below was a photo of a younger version of myself in judicial robes looking serious and determined. Jasmine's eyes widened. You were a federal judge, but why doesn't anyone know this? I sighed deeply. It's a long story and one I've never told anyone here, not even Harry. In my previous life, I had been Judge Amalia Harrington, respected and sometimes feared in legal circles. After graduating near the top of my class at Columbia Law School, I had worked as a prosecutor, then a defense attorney, and finally as a judge. By my early 40s, I had earned a reputation as a brilliant jurist with an unwavering commitment to justice. I handled several high-profile cases, I explained to Jasmine. One involved a powerful businessman who was defrauding elderly investors. He had political connections, friends in high places. When I refused to dismiss the charges against him, the threats began. The threats had been serious enough that the FBI had become involved. But even with protection, the situation had escalated. My husband, John, who had been a professor of ethics at the university, was attacked one night in a parking garage, supposedly a random mugging gone wrong. After John's death, I continued on the bench. I thought I was being brave, standing up to intimidation. But then someone broke into our home while Harry was sleeping. They left a note on his pillow, a warning about what could happen to a 12-year-old boy whose mother didn't know when to back off. I had immediately resigned from the bench and arranged to relocate with Harry to a small city across the country, where I took a new identity not through witness protection, but through the help of friends in the Justice Department who understood the danger we were in. I became Amalia Harrington elementary school teacher. I kept my first name but changed our last name from Harlow to Harrington. I chose teaching because I had always loved working with children, and because it was so different from my previous career that no one would make the connection. Jasmine listened fascinated. So Harry doesn't know about any of this. I shook my head. I planned to tell him when he was older, but as time passed, it seemed unnecessary. We were safe. We had a good life. And I worried that the knowledge might burden him or worse, make him feel we were living a lie. What about when he decided to become a lawyer? Jasmine asked. Wasn't that difficult for you to hide your background? It was, I admitted. I had to be very careful. I would bite my tongue when he came home talking about cases or legal theories, pretending to only understand the basics. Sometimes I would intentionally misuse legal terminology just to maintain the facade. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. I had spent my adult life in the legal profession, rising to one of its highest positions. And now I was facing a court battle, where the other side thought I was just a confused old school teacher. But how does this help us now? Jasmine asked. I mean, it's fascinating, but there's more, I said. Before I left the bench, I presided over several landmark cases involving elder protection laws. I wrote opinions that actually strengthened the legal protections against exactly the kind of scheme Catherine is running. I turned to another page in my album showing a news clipping with the headline, Judge Harlow's ruling sets new precedent for elder protection. And I continued feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. I mentored dozens of young lawyers and clerks. Many of them have gone on to significant positions, Judges, legislators, even a state Supreme Court justice. Jasmine's eyes widened. Do you know who's been assigned to your case? The judge, I mean. I had been avoiding looking at the court papers too closely, finding the whole situation too painful. Now I pulled them out and scanned for the judge's name. Judge Thomas Wilson. I read aloud the name, not immediately registering. Jasmine was already typing on her laptop. Let me look him up. Here he is. Judge Thomas Wilson, appointed to the county court 5 years ago. Previously worked as a clerk for, oh my God. She turned the laptop toward me. There on the screen was a professional biography of Judge Wilson, which mentioned that early in his career he had served as a clerk for federal Judge Amalia Harlow. He was your clerk, Jasmine whispered. Memories flooded back. Thomas Wilson, a serious, dedicated young man with a passion for elder law. He had worked for me for 2 years and had shown tremendous promise. I had written him a glowing recommendation when he applied for a position with the district attorney's office. I haven't seen or spoken to him in over 20 years, I said. He wouldn't know I'm here, living under a slightly different name. This changes everything, Jasmine said excitedly. He'll recognize you. He'll know you're not some confused old woman who needs a conservator. I wasn't so sure. It's been a long time. I was in my 40s then. I'm nearly 70 now. Trust me, Jasmine insisted. You don't forget the judge you clerked for. Especially not someone like you. For the first time since receiving the court papers, I felt a glimmer of real hope. But it was tempered with anxiety. Revealing my true identity meant confronting the past I had carefully hidden for decades. It meant Harry would finally learn the truth about who his mother really was and why we had moved across the country all those years ago. I need to make a call, I said slowly. There's someone who can verify all of this for the court if necessary. Justice Eleanor Blackwell had been a close colleague on the federal bench and was now serving on the state Supreme Court. We hadn't spoken in years, but we had been friends once. I could only hope she would remember me with fondness. With trembling fingers, I dialed her chambers, prepared for the secretary to block my call. To my surprise, when I gave my real name, Judge Amalia Harlow, I was put through almost immediately. Amalia Eleanor's voice was older but unmistakable. My God, is it really you? It's me, Eleanor, I confirmed, tears welling in my eyes at the sound of a voice from my past. Where have you been all these years? After what happened with John, you just disappeared. I explained my situation briefly, both the past and the present crisis. Eleanor listened without interruption, and when I finished, her response was immediate and firm. Of course I'll help. I remember young Thomas Wilson, he was brilliant. He'll certainly recognize you, but I'll make some calls just to make sure he's aware of the full situation before the hearing. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long moment, processing what I had just done. After more than 20 years of hiding my past, I was about to reveal it in the most public way possible in a courtroom in front of my son and the daughter-in-law who was trying to take everything from me. Are you okay? Jasmine asked gently. I nodded slowly. I think so. For years, I've been living as if my past was something to be ashamed of, something to hide. But maybe it's time to remember who I really am. That night, as I prepared for bed, I stood in front of the mirror in Jasmine's bathroom and really looked at myself. Behind the silver hair and the lines of age, I could still see the confident judge I had once been. I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin, practicing the posture that had once commanded respect in a federal courtroom. Hello, Judge Harlow, I whispered to my reflection. It's time for you to return to court. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Jasmine had helped me select an outfit that was dignified but not flashy. A navy blue suit I had kept from my teaching days paired with a simple pearl necklace. Remember, Jasmine coached as we drove to the courthouse, regardless of what happens with Judge Wilson. We have solid evidence that Catherine has done this before. We have the bank records showing unauthorized transfers. We have the forged deed. We can win this on the merits. I nodded, but I knew that conservatorship cases often came down to perception. If the judge believed I was competent, we would win. If not, I could lose everything: my home, my independence, my dignity. The county courthouse was a modern building, with none of the grandeur of the federal courts where I had once presided. As we walked up the steps, I spotted Harry and Catherine in the distance. Catherine was dressed impeccably in a cream-colored suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Harry looked uncomfortable in a dark suit, his eyes downcast. When Catherine saw me, she leaned over and whispered something to Harry. He looked up, caught my eye, and quickly looked away again. The pain of his betrayal hit me anew. My own son couldn't even look me in the eye. Catherine, on the other hand, made direct eye contact and smiled a cold, confident smile that said she had already won. As we passed each other in the lobby, she even rolled her eyes, slightly dismissing me as a nuisance rather than a serious opponent. Inside the courtroom, Catherine and Harry sat at one table with their lawyer, a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit. Jasmine and I took our places at the other table. I could feel eyes on us: the clerk, the bailiff, a few spectators who had wandered in, probably assuming this would be a routine, boring hearing. Judge Wilson had not yet entered the courtroom. I found myself studying the judicial bench, remembering what it felt like to sit in the judge's chair, to hold that power and responsibility. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Thomas Wilson presiding." Judge Wilson entered from a side door, a tall man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and glasses. His face was serious as he took his seat and glanced down at the papers before him. "Good morning," he said. "We're here in the matter of the conservatorship of Amalia Harrington. I see both parties are present. Let's begin with opening statements." Catherine's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. Mrs. Harrington is an elderly woman showing clear signs of cognitive decline. Her daughter-in-law, Catherine Harrington, has observed concerning behavior, memory lapses, confusion, paranoid accusations. Medical professionals have evaluated Mrs. Harrington and found her to be in the early stages of dementia." He went on to paint a picture of me as a sad, confused old woman who needed protection from myself. In his telling, Catherine was a concerned family member stepping up out of love and duty. Mrs. Harrington's home is becoming unsafe for her to live in alone. She has fallen twice in recent months. After a bout with pneumonia, her mental state deteriorated further. She now accuses family members of stealing from her, has become paranoid about her finances, and has fled her home to stay with an acquaintance, refusing to communicate with her son. When it was Jasmine's turn, she stood confidently despite her youth and limited legal experience. "Your Honor, this case is indeed straightforward, but not in the way opposing counsel suggests. This is a clear case of attempted elder abuse and financial exploitation." She outlined Catherine's scheme in concise terms: the unauthorized bank transfers, the forged deed, the pattern of similar behavior in previous cases. As she spoke, I watched Judge Wilson's face. He was listening carefully, his expression neutral and professional. Catherine's lawyer called their first witness, a Dr. Peterson, one of the doctors who had supposedly evaluated me. As he took the stand and began testifying about my alleged cognitive decline, I felt a surge of anger. This man had never met me, had never examined me yet. Here he was confidently declaring me incompetent. "And based on your evaluation," Catherine's lawyer asked, "what is your professional opinion of Mrs. Harrington's capacity to manage her own affairs?" "In my professional opinion," Dr. Peterson replied smoothly, "Mrs. Harrington is suffering from moderate dementia and is no longer capable of making sound financial or personal decisions." During cross-examination, Jasmine was direct. "Dr. Peterson, when exactly did you conduct your evaluation of Mrs. Harrington?" He consulted his notes. "On April 15th of this year." "That's interesting," Jasmine said, "because Mrs. Harrington was in Phoenix visiting her cousin on that date. We have plane tickets, hotel receipts, and credit card statements to prove it." Dr. Peterson looked momentarily flustered but recovered quickly. "I must have written the wrong date. It was around that time. Did you conduct this evaluation in your office or at Mrs. Harrington's home?" "In my office." "And who brought Mrs. Harrington to this appointment?" "Her daughter-in-law, Catherine Harrington." Jasmine produced a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Dr. Peterson's office records for April obtained via subpoena. They show no appointment for an Amalia Harrington, and in fact, Dr. Peterson was at a medical conference in Chicago the entire week. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly, but his expression remained composed. Dr. Peterson, do you have an explanation for this discrepancy? The doctor shifted uncomfortably. There must be some error in the records. Catherine was called next. She gave a performance worthy of an actress playing the concerned, loving daughter-in-law. I've tried so hard to help Amalia, she said, her voice breaking just enough to suggest genuine emotion. At first, the memory issues were small, forgetting where she put her keys, repeating the same stories. But after her illness, things got worse. She became paranoid, accusing me of taking her things, of accessing her accounts. And did you access her accounts? Jasmine asked during cross-examination. Only with her permission to help her pay bills and manage her finances when she was ill. I see. And did she also give you permission to add your name to the deed of her house? Catherine hesitated. She agreed that it made sense for estate planning purposes. Yet she claims she never signed such a document. In fact, we have an expert who will testify that the signature on that deed is not Mrs. Harrington's. How do you explain that? She's confused, Catherine insisted. She signed it and now doesn't remember. When Harry took the stand, I could barely look at him. His testimony was less polished than Catherine's, more hesitant. I love my mother, he said, his voice strained. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But she needs help. She's not the same person she was a year ago. When was the last time you had a real conversation with your mother? Jasmine asked him. Not about her finances or the house, but about her life, her feelings, her thoughts. Harry looked down. I've been busy with work. Too busy to notice that your wife was systematically taking control of your mother's assets. Objection, Catherine's lawyer called out. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Wilson ruled. Rephrase, counselor. Throughout these testimonies, I sat quietly at our table, observing everything with the trained eye of a former judge. I noted how Judge Wilson managed his courtroom with a firm but fair hand, how he listened carefully to both sides. I wondered if he had recognized me yet, if he saw any trace of the mentor he had once known. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. As I walked to the witness box, I felt a strange calm settling over me. This was a familiar place, though I was accustomed to sitting much higher up. After I was sworn in, Jasmine began her questioning, establishing my background as a teacher, my health status, and my mental clarity. I answered everything directly and articulately, making sure to look at Judge Wilson as I spoke. Mrs. Harrington, Jasmine asked, did you ever authorize Catherine Harrington to access your bank accounts or transfer funds from them? No, I did not, I said firmly. Did you ever sign a document adding Catherine Harrington's name to the deed of your home? No, I did not. Catherine's lawyer's cross-examination was aggressive, designed to provoke confusion or contradictions. He fired questions rapidly, jumping from topic to topic. Isn't it true that you've been forgetful lately, that you misplace things, that you sometimes get confused about what day it is? Like anyone my age, I occasionally misplace my reading glasses, I replied calmly. But I am not confused about important matters like my financial decisions or who should own my home. Yet you fled your own house to stay with a former student. Doesn't that suggest paranoia? It suggests self-preservation. When someone is trying to take everything you own through deception and fraud, removing yourself from their presence is simply common sense. As the questioning continued, I noticed Judge Wilson watching me with increasing intensity. There was a crease between his eyebrows, a look of concentration that suggested he was trying to place me to reconcile the elderly woman before him with someone from his past. Mrs. Harrington, Catherine's lawyer said with exaggerated patience, isn't it possible that you simply don't remember giving Catherine permission to manage your affairs, that your memory isn't what it once was? I straightened in my seat and looked directly at Judge Wilson. Your Honor, may I address the court directly? He nodded, his expression still one of puzzled concentration. You may. For 25 years, I have lived in this community as Amalia Harrington, fourth grade teacher. Before that, I lived another life, a life I kept private for reasons of safety and simplicity. But today, that privacy has become a liability used against me by those who would take advantage of my seeming ordinariness. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, before I was Amalia Harrington, I was Federal Judge Amalia Harlow of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And if I'm not mistaken, you once served as my clerk. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Wilson's eyes widened in shock as he leaned forward, studying my face intently. "My God," he whispered, just loud enough to be heard in the silent room. Is that her? Is that really Judge Harlow?" Catherine's smug expression faltered. Harry looked up his face, a mask of confusion. "Yes, Thomas," I said gently, using his first name for the first time. "It's been many years, and I've aged considerably, but it's me." Judge Wilson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes as if trying to clear his vision. When he looked at me again, recognition dawned fully on his face. "Judge Harlow," he said, his voice filled with respect and a touch of awe. I never imagined. What happened? Why are you here living under a different name?" I explained briefly about the threats about John's murder, about the warning left on Harry's pillow. As I spoke, I watched my son's face transform from confusion to shock to a dawning understanding. "I left the bench to protect my son," I concluded. "I created a new, quieter life for us here where no one knew my background. I became a teacher, and I never looked back. Until today, when my past became the only defense against losing everything I've built in my new life." Catherine's lawyer was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is preposterous. Anyone can claim to be someone else. There's no proof that Mrs. Harrington was ever this judge." Judge Wilson's expression had changed from shock to something closer to anger. "Counselor, I spent 2 years clerking for Judge Amalia Harlow. I know her face, her voice, her mannerisms. I recognize her despite the years that have passed." Even so, the lawyer persisted, "This theatrical revelation has no bearing on the case at hand. Mrs. Harrington's past career doesn't prove she's mentally competent now." "On the contrary," Jasmine interjected, "it establishes a clear pattern of lucidity and intelligence throughout Mrs. Harrington's life. Furthermore, we have Justice Eleanor Blackwell of the State Supreme Court standing by to testify via phone to confirm Judge Harlow's identity and her sound judgment." At this, Catherine's face lost all color. She whispered urgently to her lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Wilson turned to me. "Judge Harlow." "Mrs. Harrington, I'm deeply troubled by what I've heard today. It appears that serious allegations of fraud and elder abuse have been made against the petitioner in this case." He turned to Catherine. "Mrs. Harrington, these accusations, if proven true, could result in criminal charges. Before we proceed further, I suggest you consult with your attorney about your position." Catherine's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. She's making this all up. She's just a confused old woman who taught 4th grade. Harry, tell them." All eyes turned to my son, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't fully read: shock, confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "Mom," he said, his voice small and uncertain, "is this true? Were you really a federal judge?" "Yes, Harry," I said softly. "I'm sorry I never told you the whole truth. I thought I was protecting you." Before he could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and Jasmine's paralegal entered, accompanied by 3 elderly individuals, an older man using a walker and 2 women, one in a wheelchair. "Your Honor," Jasmine announced, "these are former clients from the elder law firm where Catherine worked before meeting Harry Harrington. They have all come forward with similar stories of how she attempted to gain control of their assets." Catherine jumped to her feet. "They're lying. They're all confused, senile, just like her." She pointed at me, her fingers shaking with rage. "Miss Catherine Harrington," Judge Wilson said, his voice now cold and formal, "I suggest you sit down and remain silent. Based on the evidence presented and my own recognition of the respondent, I am dismissing this petition for conservatorship immediately." Catherine's face contorted with fury. "You can't do this. That house is mine. I've worked too hard to set this up." The outburst hung in the air, a damning admission of her true intentions. Bailiff Judge Wilson said quietly, "Please ensure that Miss Catherine Harrington remains in the courthouse. I'm ordering her passport surrendered as I believe criminal charges may be forthcoming." Catherine's lawyer distanced himself immediately. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any fraudulent activity. I was proceeding based on what appeared to be legitimate medical evaluations." "That will be for the district attorney to determine," Judge Wilson replied. "This court is adjourned, but I'm ordering all parties to remain available for further proceedings." As the courtroom began to empty, Harry approached me hesitantly. His face was a mixture of shame and confusion. "Mom," he began, his voice breaking, "I don't know what to say. I believed her. I thought I was helping you. I wanted to embrace him, to tell him everything was forgiven. But the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep." "I know you did," I said quietly. "We have a lot to talk about, Harry. But not right now." As Jasmine and I prepared to leave, Judge Wilson approached us. "Judge Harlow," he said formally, "I would be honored if you would join me in my chambers. There's much I'd like to discuss with you." I glanced at Jasmine, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, Miss Harrington. I'll wait for you." As we walked toward his chambers, Judge Wilson lowered his voice. "I never thought I'd see you again. Your opinions on Warner v. Eldercare Services changed the course of my career. I've cited your work dozens of times." He shook his head in wonder. "All these years you were here teaching fourth graders about fractions." "And loving it," I said with a small smile. "Life takes unexpected turns, Thomas." "That it does," he agreed. "That it certainly does." In the weeks following the court hearing, my life transformed in ways I could never have anticipated. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Former Federal Judge Discovered Teaching Elementary School," which led to a flurry of interview requests from larger publications and even television news. I declined most of them, preferring to maintain what privacy I could. Catherine's legal troubles mounted quickly. The district attorney, upon reviewing the evidence Jasmine had gathered, charged her with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and attempted elder abuse. The investigation revealed a pattern of similar schemes dating back to her early 20s. She had been targeting vulnerable elderly people for years, using her legal knowledge to manipulate the system. Most painfully, I learned that Harry had been largely ignorant of his wife's activities. He had believed her when she described me as confused and declining. His greatest fault had been trust in someone who didn't deserve it, combined with a willful blindness that allowed him to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths. We sat together in my living room 3 weeks after the hearing, the first time he had visited since the court case. The atmosphere was tense, awkward, both of us unsure how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. "I don't know how to apologize for this," Harry said, finally staring down at his hands. "I should have seen through her. I should have trusted you." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not softening the truth. "I'm your mother, Harry. I have always put your interests first, even when it meant giving up my career, my identity." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, looking up at me with the same questioning eyes he'd had as a child. "About being a judge, about Dad's murder. About all of it." I sighed deeply. "At first, it was for your protection. You were so young when we moved here, and I was terrified that the people who threatened you might find us. Later, I suppose it seemed easier to maintain the fiction. You knew me as just Mom, just a teacher. I worried that learning the truth might make you feel our entire life together had been built on lies." "It feels that way now," he admitted. "Finding out in a courtroom with everyone watching, I felt like I didn't know you at all." "You do know me, Harry," I said gently. "Being a teacher wasn't a disguise, it became a genuine part of who I am. The mother who raised you, who loved you, who cheered at your baseball games and helped with your homework, that was all real. Rebuilding our relationship would take time. Trust once broken doesn't heal overnight. But we both committed to the process, scheduling regular dinners, slowly relearning how to talk to each other. I shared stories from my days on the bench, filling in the blanks of my past. Harry told me about his growing discomfort with Catherine in the months before the court case, the red flags he had ignored out of loyalty to his wife. I wanted so badly to believe she loved me, he confessed during one of our conversations. I think I always knew something wasn't right, but admitting that meant accepting that my marriage was a lie. While Harry and I were working on our relationship, I was developing a new purpose for this chapter of my life. Jasmine had introduced me to several elderly clients at her firm who were facing situations similar to mine, predatory individuals trying to gain control of their assets through manipulation or legal maneuvering. They need someone who understands both the legal system and the emotional toll of these battles, Jasmine explained. Someone like you. With Judge Wilson's encouragement, I began offering free consultations to seniors facing conservatorship proceedings or suspected financial abuse. We formed a small advocacy group meeting weekly in the community center. I didn't take on cases as an attorney. I hadn't practiced law in decades, but I could offer guidance, support, and the perspective of someone who had been through the process. My past as Judge Harlow, which I had hidden for so long, became my greatest asset in this new role. Legal professionals who remembered my work or had studied my opinions treated our advocacy group with respect. Doors that might have remained closed to an ordinary retired teacher opened for the former federal judge. In a surprising development, several of my former fourth-grade students reached out after learning about my past. Many had gone on to impressive careers: doctors, engineers, business owners. They shared stories of how my encouragement had influenced their paths. "You treated us with such respect," one former student wrote. "Now, I understand why you always said we should present our evidence when we had a disagreement. You were teaching us to think like little lawyers." 6 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected visitor, Justice Eleanor Blackwell, my old colleague from the federal bench. She had come to town for a legal conference and made time to see me. We sat in my garden, two women in their 60s, reminiscing about cases we had heard, opinions we had written, the challenges of being female judges in a predominantly male profession. "You know," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "when you disappeared, many of us thought your voice had been silenced. We mourned the loss of your legal mind, your perspectives. But hearing about your years as a teacher, the hundreds of young lives you shaped, perhaps your influence was even greater in that role." Her words made me consider my life's journey in a new light. I had always seen my move from judge to teacher as a step down, a sacrifice made for Harry's safety. But had it really been a diminishment? Or simply a different kind of impact? The hardest part of all this, I confided in Eleanor, has been forgiving Harry. He's my son, and I love him unconditionally. But his betrayal cut deep. Eleanor nodded, understanding. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the hurt. It's about choosing not to let it control your future. You're forging a new relationship with him now, one based on honesty and your complete identity. That's its own kind of gift. She was right. The painful revelation of my past had paradoxically allowed me to integrate my two lives for the first time. I was no longer just Amalia, the teacher, or just Judge Harlow. I was fully myself, embracing all parts of my journey. My relationship with Harry continued to heal gradually. A year after the court case, he accepted a position with a nonprofit organization providing legal services to seniors inspired by what had happened to me. "I want to make amends," he explained. "Not just to you, but to others who might be vulnerable to people like Catherine." As for Catherine, she eventually accepted a plea deal rather than face trial. The evidence against her was overwhelming. She would serve 5 years in prison, followed by probation, and was permanently barred from working in any capacity related to elder care or financial services. I chose not to attend her sentencing. There was nothing more to be said between us. No satisfaction to be gained from watching her punishment. The best revenge, I had decided, was living well and helping others avoid similar situations. On my 70th birthday, Harry and Jasmine organized a surprise party that brought together people from both halves of my life: former colleagues from my judicial days and beloved students from my teaching career. Watching them mingle, sharing stories about me that created a complete picture of who I was, I felt a sense of wholeness I hadn't experienced in decades. Judge Wilson attended, raising a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "To Amalia Harlow Harrington," he said, "who taught me as a young clerk that justice requires both a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart." Whether in a federal courtroom or an elementary classroom, she has always embodied both qualities. We are all better for having known her in whatever capacity. Looking around at the gathered faces, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal by Catherine had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for reclaiming my full identity. Sometimes it takes our deepest wounds to reveal our greatest strengths. I have learned that who we are isn't defined by titles or past achievements, but by how we respond to life's challenges, by the connections we forge, and by our willingness to stand up for ourselves and others. I had kept my past hidden, partly out of fear rather than just for protection, a fear that I would be defined solely by who I had been rather than who I had become. Now in my 70th year, I embrace both my past and my present. I am Judge Harlow and Teacher Amalia. I am a mother who was betrayed but chose forgiveness. I am an advocate for those who face what I faced. And most importantly, I am finally, completely myself. Have you ever had to reveal a hidden part of yourself to protect what matters most? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if you found strength or insight from my journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming betrayal and finding justice. Remember to share this video with anyone who might be facing similar challenges in their families. Thank you for listening, and remember, your true identity is your most powerful shield against those who would try to diminish you.